Assalamualaikum and greetings everyone. I'm Junaidah Zeno from Universiti Malaysia Sabah, and today I'll be presenting my paper entitled Marketing via Social Media: Are Malaysian Consumers Legally Protected Against the So-Called Miracle Products? As for my introduction, the internet has changed the way businesses market their product and services. In recent years, social media have outperformed traditional advertising channels such as television, radio, and newspapers. At the same time, marketers are quickly shifting from conventional advertising methods, and consequently, people gradually devote more time to the internet than traditional media. And at the same time, consumer, they favor social media ads over conventional methods such as newspaper because the former is less expensive. And as a result, consumer they spend more time on social media than ever before, and thus this has exposed them to a wide range of advertisement. The total populations of Malaysia as of January 2022 was 32.98 million, and out of this figure, the number of social media users was 30.25 million, which is equivalent to 91.7% of the total population in Malaysia. And this figure revealed that 54.7% of Malaysians visit social networks to seek information about brands and products. This data indicates that social networks are the most popular means of accessing information. While Figure 2 shows that as of February 2022, social media marketing has been the core of digital marketing in Malaysia. For example, 44.1% of the respondents acknowledged that their primary motivation for using social media platform was to see what was being discussed, and this may include products that are going viral. Similarly, 40.5% and 37% of the respondents use social media to look for things to do or to purchase, which may include both goods and services, while 31.9% of the respondents also use social media to share opinions about goods and services. And for these reasons, consumers might find their reviews about products more reliable than the brand itself, since the endorsement came from consumers too. In regards to my research problems, of course, nowadays social media platforms are being used not only for social interactions, but many people also use it for business purposes. And this scenario is known as social commerce. However, the problem here is that social commerce has blurred the lines between transactional and social environments. So in particular, the social aspect of the social e-commerce make identifying the parties, for example, who are the consumers, who are the sellers, and who are the influencers, what are their legal status, whether they have legal liability in the eyes of the consumers law, more difficult. And of course, there's an issue about obtaining information not only from reliable sources like official government health website, but also consumers nowadays they obtain information from social media platform. And this can be problematic for users who blindly trust the information without verifying its accuracy, because concern about the quality and reliability of online health information should not be ignored, because they may significantly impact or affect the individual well-being and public health. And of course, there's issue about consumers who are easily swayed by claims made in advertisement, in which may also result in losses and jeopardize their health. Another issue here is that not all jurisdictions have sufficient legal tools to regulate the marketing practices. There's also issue about digital social influencers, because many consumers nowadays they are not aware that these social media influencers like public figures, celebrities, they lack medical background, which may lead them to provide misleading information to consumers. So these are my research objective, hypothesis, and research questions. Basically, I'm looking into whether the law enforcers in Malaysia had effectively governed the deceptive marketing issues within the context of social media setting. For my methodologies, I'm using a doctrinal approach by looking into the legislations and relevant guidelines. And I'm also adopted comparative purposes by comparing between the approaches in Malaysia and English law. The first statute that I analyze is the Medicines Advertisement and Sale Act 1956. So under Section 3, the Act has firmly prohibits any advertisement relating to certain kind of diseases. So what are those diseases? You can see from the screen. So there's about prohibitions about advertising something related to asthma, cancer, diabetes, kidney defect, and so on. And there's also prohibitions about advertising something relating to skill or service. And Section 4B of the Act clearly required that all advertisement must be approved by the Medicine Advertisement Board. And of course, there's penalty provided for any violations of law, which is under Section 5. So there's penalty for first convictions and also for subsequent convictions, which involve both fines and imprisonment. And these are the examples of advertisement that clearly violates the requirements under Medicines Advertisement and Sale Act 1956. And I also look into the Food Act 1983, in which if a product is classified as food, it may not claim to prevent or can treat or cure disease. And if the food is to make medical claim, it must first be registered with the Malaysian Drugs Control Authority, Ministry of Health, Malaysia. And this act also contains sections about false, misleading, and deceptive labeling, and for food that contains substances which poisonous, harmful, or injurious to health, there will be a fine not exceeding 100K, and of course imprisonment not exceeding 10 years or both. Sorry for this one. The third legislation that I'm looking into is the Consumer Protection Act 1999. So in this section, in this act, there are a few sections relevant. First one is Section 9 and of course Section 10. So both of these sections are concerns about misleading conduct and false or misleading representation. So what is meant by misleading conduct or false or misleading representation? So it will be considered as an offense under this act if such conduct, representation, or practice is capable or can lead a consumer into error. The last statute that I analyze is the Trade Description Act 2011. Basically, this act also prohibits false and misleading statements about goods and services, and the aspect considered in assessing those offenses are practically identical to those under the CPA. For comparative observations in the UK, these are the main legislation governing consumer law, and these legislations are enforced by the Competitions and Markets Authority, the local authority trading standards, and also the Advertising Standards Authority. As for the enforcement in the UK, the ASA has been making all its ruling and sanctions transparent on its website. And this indirectly serves as a reminder to those making an advertisement online to comply with the specified regulation. The CMA also has taken several initiatives to regulate influencers on digital marketing. So their first has launched investigations on influencers, and then once they have the result of the investigation, they issue warning letter, and then the CMA also published 2 guidelines specifically targeted at influencers. So those guidelines require brands to disclose what are their commercial relationship, And also the guidelines focuses on transparency because the CMA, they want to ensure that consumers they are aware with what kind of information they receive, whether the person disclosing the information or endorse the information receive incentive to make that post or to make whatever reviews about particular products. In regard to the analysis, there are laws applicable to govern social media advertising in Malaysia. Still, the internet's borderless nature can make the legal framework established in the analog era inadequate to combat the exponential growth of deceptive marketing via social media. So first, there may be issue in terms of enforcement and monitoring compliance in social media setting. So in this regard, law enforcer needs to tool up to continue meeting their obligation. So for starters, they need to be more transparent with the public on how they deal with those breaching the advertising law, similar to the approach taken by the UK enforcers, for example. And so this will raise consumers' awareness while simultaneously serving as a warning to those intending to sell a so-called miracle product on their social media page. And then number two, when legal enforcement faces challenges in monitoring compliance, of course, it is for consumers to equip themselves with knowledge of their statutory right. So at the same time, consumers must join forces with the enforcement authorities by reporting those potentially involved in violating the law for further investigation. And of course, number three, brands and sellers also need to self-regulate themselves, so to limit legal intervention. As for the conclusion, it is anticipated that Malaysian social media users will increase in the coming years. So from the legal perspective, all relevant stakeholders should be legally ready. For instance, law enforcers need to tool up to continue protecting consumers, and consumers themselves should not rely solely on the enforcer to protect their rights. So consumers need also to equip themselves with legal knowledge. And most importantly, sellers and those making advertisement should be aware of the potential legal consequences before making any post, because the punishment are severe compared to the profit gains from that particular post or endorsement. And finally, legal research on consumer protections against misleading and exaggerated claims on product promoted via social media is still limited in Malaysia. And these practices are still prevalent on social media, but the authorities have taken no significant action thus far to combat this activity. Therefore, extensive legal research may serve as a wake-up call to the gravity of the issue in question. However, my paper is unable to delve into the issue in detail, but future research may discuss other legislation like guidelines and related agencies such as the Communications and Multimedia Act, the Malaysian Code of Advertising Practice, and also the advertising standards in Malaysia. And in regard to the subject matter of future research, it can be broadened to include cross-border legislation, for example, and perhaps maybe to analyze the platform itself, because the platform like Facebook, Instagram, they serve as the gatekeeper and intermediary for sellers, influencers, and relevant parties to endorse products. And lastly, my paper is more on doctrinal and comparative research, but it can be a starting point for those wanted to do empirical research to understand how consumers view the relevant posts and to what extent they are adversely affected. And indirectly, it would provide valuable insight into the necessity for regulatory and non-regulatory intervention. So that's all for my presentation, and thank you for your attention.